I'm going to kick off. Lee's going to very kindly, and his colleagues is going to very kindly drive the slides. So Lee, can we just jump on to slide number 2, please? So I know one of the questions we had is, what does MaPS stand for? Who are the Money and Pension Service? So I always kick off by having a little bit of an introduction here, just about who we are and what we do and the kind of key remits for us. So we're an arm's length government department. Head office for us is Holborn near the City of London, in central London. We have about 400 colleagues right across the whole of the UK, whether they're based in London, the Midlands, up here, like me in the Northwest, or Scotland, or Wales, or Northern Ireland. So we're a UK-wide government department. And we have a particular remit that the government asks us to do. And that remit is really all around helping people get independent, free information and guidance to help people make effective financial decisions over their lifetime. So the Money and Pension Service, it's a bit of a typical government department name. It's quite long, so we tend to call ourselves MaPS. That's our formal name. We work really closely with some other big government departments that you'll know pretty well. We work very closely with the Department for Work and Pensions. But just one thing that I would say is that we do not provide benefits. What I mean by that is we don't pay benefits and we don't allocate benefits. That's DWP's job. And I can see someone's also asked if we're linked with PensionWise, and we definitely are. And there's a section right at the end, Julie, in which I'll explain how our PensionWise colleagues work for us. So we have a couple of brands within the Money and Pension Service. The big national brand that our website is branded as is MoneyHelper. So the reason we use MoneyHelper rather than the Money and Pension Service, it's a little bit easier for people to engage with. It works much better in terms of search engine optimization when people are looking for us. It's a bit fresher, and for people in the high street, consumers, they just find it a bit of an easier way to engage with us. So one of the things I just want to stress today is everything that I'm going to talk to you about today, all the information that we provide, the support that we provide, is provided for free, and it's totally independent. So we don't have any relationship. We're not a comparison site. We're not like Money Saving Expert. Our job is not to sell either the people on this call or consumers across the whole of UK society a product. Our job is to help them. We're not there to sell them an insurance product or to push them towards a particular bank account or towards a particular pension provider. Our job is to help people throughout their lifetime, whatever age they are, in terms of helping them make the best decisions that they possibly can. So Lee, can we just jump on to slide number 3, please? Oh, it's just brought up the little logos of the departments we work with. There we go. So the vision for us, what we're tasked with by government, is about transforming financial well-being right across the UK. So there's about 70 million people in the UK. And what we mean about financial well-being is people making the best and most effective usage of the money that they have to provide them with support, to give them confidence when they engage with money decisions, whether they're working with their bank or whether they're working with a credit card company or whether they're engaging with their pension provider, and to help people consistently make the right decisions in terms of when they're using their money. One of the biggest challenges that we have in the UK is that a lot of people suffer from poor financial well-being. They're under financial stress or financial difficulty, or they're in debt, or they're in arrears. And those challenges put people under an awful lot of pressure. So what we do as a department is we try and work to improve people's financial well-being. And you've probably heard a lot more about that phrase, financial well-being, over the last 2 to 3 years. You know, we've been doing this for 15 years. We were set up, our original name was the Money Advice Service in following the financial crash in 2007, 2008. And we're set up and geared to deal with times of crisis financially for people. So obviously a lot of people have struggled and had a really tough time. Lots of sectors have had a really tough time during the COVID pandemic, you know, and we're still seeing the impacts of that, for example, on the airline industry. But we're also here to deal with more immediate challenges. So for example, at the moment, one of the things I've talked to Lee about over the last couple of months is the cost of living challenge, which everybody on this call will be very, very aware of. So we've got some specific information that I'm going to run through today. I'm going to take you through visually what our website is like, how you can access our information, some of the tools that we use to support people. Tools give an interactive response that's tailored just to you as an individual, and some of the new information that we've built to help people, particularly with the kind of cost of living and inflationary challenges that are going on at the moment. Lee, can we jump on one more, please? So challenge of rising bills and inflation. You know, where are we at the moment? Well, one of the things that we do as a government department is we do research, independent research on a very regular basis right across the country, and we tend to regionalise that research. So we'll do research up here in the northwest for Greater Manchester, for Liverpool region, for Merseyside, for Wirral, for Cheshire, wherever it may be. We'll do similar things in the Midlands. We'll do similar things in Yorkshire or in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, the most recent research that we've done, we interviewed 1,100 people for 1 hour. So that's, you can see, that's quite a lot of people to spend some time with us, and our insights team to spend some time with them. And actually for the Northwest, that was the current figure. I always think that people look at that and think I've pulled it out of the sky because it's bang on 50%. But actually that figure has crept up over the last 6 to 12 months from being in the mid 40s to 50%. So 50% of the population here in the Northwest, one way or another, are finding bills or credit commitments a struggle to keep up with, or perhaps they started to fall behind with their commitments. Now that varies across sections of society, and it varies across divisions of employers that I work with. So as well as working with people like yourselves, I engage with lots of different types of organisations. So for example, we work very closely with a lot of councils. We work very closely with a lot of housing associations. We work very closely with a lot of big businesses. I look after Jaguar Land Rover at Liverpool, at Halewood at Liverpool. I look after Co-op head office in Manchester. So you can see those are lots of different sectors, be they automotive, be they healthcare, be they retail. But what we're finding is that lots and lots of organisations are saying their employees are starting to struggle. And that's not a surprise. This is the worst financial challenge that this country has faced since the mid-1970s. You know, I've done this job one way or another for about 30 years, for about 3 decades. I'm 51, and I've never known a time like this, ever. And the only time when you look back that I can see, and I was too small really to remember it, is when you look back to the mid-70s, and they were really struggling with the winter of discontent and the fuel crisis that occurred around that time. So one of the things that we do when we engage with people is we also look at what problems that's creating for them. And you can see that on the mental health side, that people struggling to keep up with bills, particularly those who already have mental health issues, are finding this is becoming more and more of a pressure. Now, we're not the NHS. We are a government department that specialises in financial wellbeing. But one of the things that we have done, and I'm going to show you today, is we've hired in some more mental health professionals to work in our contact centres and to work in the engagement that we provide, because that is becoming more and more apparent in terms of the calls that we are getting to our contact centres, in terms of the calls that we're getting to our digital contact centres, in terms of queries that we're getting on things like WhatsApp, and just in our general engagement on sessions like today. Lee, can we move on one more, please? So, as I said earlier on, I like to give things in a really visual way that you guys can all take away. So one of the things I tend to do is I tend to show you the website, MoneyHelper, and I've agreed with Lee that we're going to look at some specific parts of that website today, including the Find Your Way Forwards resources that's all about cost of living. But before we get to that, I wanted to just give you a bit of an overview of what the website looks like and how big it is. So that's the introductory page to the MoneyHelper website for us at MaPS. The first thing I'd say to you is you can see it doesn't look like most government websites. We're we try and be less formal about money. We don't like talking in jargon. Before I worked for the Money and Pension Service, I used to help run the relationship with the Money and Pension Service for Lloyds Banking Group, brands like Halifax, Scottish Widows, Bank of Scotland, Birmingham Midshires. Great business, was very proud to work for them, but quite a formal business. When it speaks to people in quite a formal way. We don't like doing that. We try and demystify money and make sure when people are engaging with us, there's not lots of jargon in our phrases. There's not lots of jargon in the information that we provide. And we don't preach to people. It's not our job to tell people what to do. It's our job to provide the opportunities and the information, the guidance and the support that helps people make the best decisions possible. So one of the things I'm going to do today is just break down a couple of sections that are on that website. But to give you an idea of how big that website is, in the last 12 months, we've had nearly 24 million views on that website. And from that 24 million views, nearly 2 million people, about 1.9 million people, have either engaged with us or they've engaged with some of the partners that we work with. Now, the 400 people I work with at the Money and Pension Service can't answer every single query, every single money and financial and debt query in the country. So one of the things that we also do is we work really closely with what we see as trusted organisations. So for example, Citizens Advice, who most of you will know, pretty much in every town and high street and city across the UK, we work very closely with them. Step Change Debt Charity, who some of you may know, really big debt charity, 2,000 people. They've got massive offices in Chester, in Leeds, in Halifax, and Glasgow, and other parts of the UK. And we work very well and very closely with them. Shelter on the housing side, they've been a charity going for almost 50 years. The best housing charity in the country, without a shadow of a doubt. What they don't know about housing isn't worth knowing. So sometimes when people come and speak to us, and they'll speak to our colleagues and have a conversation with us, we might help them, but we might also say, perhaps you've got a housing query and it's a really detailed one. It'd be helpful for you to go and speak to Shelter as well. The one thing I think you can see of the organisations I'm talking about, they're pretty much all charities. So they have to have the same ethos as us. And what I mean by that is we're here to provide free guidance and help people for the right reasons. We're not here to sell a product, and we're not here to try and make a percentage out of someone's income. So if another type of organisation, for example, a high cost credit lender, came to us, someone like Wonga, and said, would you recommend us Money and Pension Service? The answer will be 110% never. You know, we won't recommend organisations like that, and we won't pass people to that kind of organisation. So from our side, we try and work with organisations that have a really good reputation and are very trusted and have the same ethos that we have as well. The other thing, just before we move on from that slide, I'd just like to show you, there's a couple of things on there. You can see that in the bottom right hand side, there's the HM government logo. That's there deliberately because it gives people trust and confidence that they're dealing with an organisation that's on their side. And above where the HM government logo is, you can see there's a little handshake logo, and it says talk to us live. You can speak to our contact centres, and right at the end of the call today, the 0800 number is on the slide deck that I provided to you. So if you speak to us, totally free, whether you have a conversation with us for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whether you speak to us once or twice, or 3 or 4 times, it doesn't matter, all completely free. But a lot of people now like to talk to us digitally as society's moved a little bit away from telephones, and particularly younger people, you know, people in their teens, first starting their first jobs, or in their 20s or their 30s, we find that, you know, that kind of younger percentage of society likes to speak to us digitally. We're very happy for people to speak to us digitally. And the one thing I would say to you is you get the same level of service. It's the same people providing those responses to you. We put a lot of effort into making sure that the information we provide is very straightforward, very understandable. And whether you speak to us digitally through a system like WhatsApp, or whether you speak to us on the telephone through our contact centre, you'll get the same consistency of service, which is really important to us. And then the other bit that I'd just like to show you before we move on from that slide is just how we break down information. So you can see, if you look about a third of the way down that page in the royal blue colour, there's a group of sections and headings called benefits, everyday money, family and care, homes, money troubles. That will cover things like debt and mortgages and arrears. Pensions and retirement, which I'm going to mention right at the end of the session today, savings and work. So we try and break down our content so that people aren't having to search all the way through it all. They can go to the key section that provides information for them. There's about 200 pages worth of content there. Within that, there'll be lots of slides, lots of visuals. We also use YouTube videos. So for example, in the YouTube videos on the home section, we have an update. We like to use people who know what they're talking about or experts in that area. So we have an update about what to deal with if you've got rent queries. That's actually provided by a contact of mine, a guy called Sean Finnegan from Liverpool, who's been a housing director for 30 years. Brilliant. What he doesn't know about housing isn't worth knowing. So we tend to use those kind of people. And also, if you do jump onto our information, we don't try and make it too long. We understand that people have really busy lives. You've got really busy work lives. You're going to have commitments at home, commitments to family, a social life. So if you look at our information, we try and make sure that within kind of 5 to 10 minutes, we've given you the key points that you need to know. If you go on one of our videos, they're not 40 minutes long, they're not 50 minutes long, they're not an hour long. They tend to be 5 minutes long, 8 minutes long, 12 minutes long. So you get the key information and then perhaps do a little bit more digging on the website, or perhaps speak to us to get some more detail if you need that. Lee, can we move on one more, please? So I said today that I break down a couple of the sections that we look at in terms of MoneyHelper. I just had enough time in 60 minutes to go through them all. But what I agree with Lee is I break down some of the key sections, particularly that are relevant to the cost of living challenges that we're having at the moment. So one of the very most popular sections that we have of those 24 million views nearly a year is everyday money. So if you click on the link on the everyday money section after we finish today, or if you're having your lunch tomorrow and having your sandwiches and you want to have a look at how it works, This system is designed very deliberately to work really well, whether you're using it on your smartphone, whether you're using it on something like a tablet, an iPad, whether you're using it on your laptop. It's designed to be very, very robust and very straightforward to use. So you can see there that we then break down in everyday money all the different sections of things that people might engage with. So there's things like banking, there's things like budgeting, there's things like credit and purchases, how to choose a credit card, applying for credit. There's also, you can see there, key costs for people. So for example, we have a topic there about buying and running a car. Now, for many people, buying and running a car is not a choice. It's something they absolutely need to do. They need it to commute to work. They need it to deal with the shifts that they work. They need it to support elderly relatives or get the children to school. They need a car as part of their lives. Now, that's a key cost for people. It's a big outgoing, and therefore it's important that the Money and Pension Service covers that. What we try and not be is naive or innocent and say to people, going back to what I was saying earlier on about preaching, if people need a car, then they need information that will help them with that. So that would include things like car finance, running costs, all the usual costs that you would expect, and break that kind of information down. The final few sections before I move on to the tools are things like insurance and types of credit. So things like store cards, overdrafts, payday loans, avoiding illegal lending, perhaps engaging with a credit union. All that information that's in the blue color there on the left-hand side, you can see, is content. So it's what we mean by that is information, advice, guidance, help. On the right-hand side is the other types of information that we provide in each particular section. And for that section, that is actually tools. So the tools for us are interactive information. And what we mean by interactive is it will give you a tailored output. You will provide, or if you provide that tool to somebody else, to a colleague or somebody you're working with, it will provide a tailored output just to them and their circumstance. Now, we don't have as many tools as we have information. So we have about a dozen tools or so. They're really the big key tools that help people in terms of making decisions and perhaps reviewing their circumstances. So I said today to Lee that we'd have a look at a couple of the key tools, and I'm going to do that now as we just kind of go through this section. So Lee, can we move on one more? So the tool example I've picked today, and it takes about 20 or so, 20, 25 minutes to fill it in, so we're not going to do it live, is the budget planner. So that budget planner, all the information that we provide is held on our servers, on government servers, so it's completely secure, and we don't harvest any of the data off it or sell any of the data. So if you use any information, if you look at anything that we're dealing with, whether it's a budget planner, whether it's advice about debt, whether it's a tool that perhaps helps you with money or choosing a credit card, you'll be totally assured that that information is held securely and confidentially and is not shared. Now, the reason I picked the budget planner today, just as an example, is if I was stood in a room with you now, and usually when I do this when I'm with people face to face, and said, how many people have a budget planner? Usually about 90% of the room puts their hand up. They go, yes, I do. The actual truth of that is it's about half that figure. About 45% of the population has a budget or a budget planner and uses one really regularly. Going back to what I was saying earlier on, we like people to be able to make the right decisions and be confident in those decisions. So using a budget planner and getting involved with that, for those of you that perhaps don't do that, is really helpful. It's what we call a financial building block. It gives you a foundation to your finances. It helps you know what's coming in terms of the money coming in. And let's be honest, most people are pretty good at that. They know what they're getting paid. They know what their benefits are. They probably know what savings they have in their bank or their building society. But the challenge for people, and particularly the challenge in the current climate, is the outgoings. That's what this budget planner really focuses very, very hard on. So it'll ask you for all your income, it'll ask you for your outgoings, and it will break down the kind of outgoings that people sometimes forget that add up over a year. So of course it'll cover things like your rent, it'll cover things like your mortgage if you're buying a home, it'll cover your council tax, your gas, your electricity, obviously, which have tended to go up over recent months in the last year. But it'll also break down things that people tend to forget. So things like perhaps you've got Sky Sports Premier League, or you've got Disney, or you've got Netflix, or you have a gym membership down the road and that's £30 a month. Doesn't feel a lot, but over a year that's nearly £400. Most people nowadays have a smartphone. You know, that might be with EE or it might be with Vodafone. It will ask you what your smartphone bill is every month, and it will build all those costs up. Now you can say to me, James, Lots of budget planners do that. That's not that unusual. What do you do that's different? So what we do that's different is, if you look in on this left-hand side of the slide there, you see step 1 is all about taking all that information in. Step 2, we give you a really visual outgoing of where your money's going, what you're spending it on, how you're using it. Again, you can say that's something that lots of budget planners do. The third bit is the bit where we get a bit different. So once we've taken that information, the budget planner will then make suggestions and hints and tips about how you can cut costs. So we're not the Grinch. We're not here to cancel all the nice things in life. But what it might do is it might look at your, for example, your smartphone bill and make a suggestion that you see if you can reduce that smartphone. It's very common. I've had my same smartphone contract for the last 3 or 4 years. Mobile phone companies are brilliant at making sure that you renew. It's very common that people don't review the price that they're paying every year or every 24 months. So you might be worth a while looking at your smartphone bill and saying, I'm with EE or I'm with Vodafone. Can I go to Tesco Mobile and get that smartphone, my iPhone 12, so I'm paying £38 a month? Can I pay £28 a month with Tesco? It will make those kind of practical tips and hints of how you can live and how you can kind of cut costs. To go back to what I was saying earlier on, we're not asking people to take all the nice things out of life. We're just really asking people to think very hard about their household budget and check their bill statements for regular payments, and if they're using those regular payments. If you've got a gym membership, do you use your gym membership? Would it be better to go ad hoc and pay each time you go, or is it better to go monthly? It's those kind of practical decisions that the budget planner is really, really good at doing. That's one of our most popular tools. We get a huge amount of hits on that, a huge amount of usage in terms of that. But as I said to you right at the start, I do like to just really repeat to people, all the information that's provided into that is held securely, and we don't share it with anybody else. We will never share it with a bank or building society or an insurance company or anybody of that nature. Lee, can we move on one more, please? So I said we talked today about rising costs and inflation, and it's the big hot topic for everybody this kind of spring and into these summer months. And my personal opinion, I can't speak for MaPS, but my personal opinion is it will be for at least the rest of this year. So as I said to you earlier on, if something new occurs, when COVID occurred, we built lots of new information, lots of new financial information to help people with things like furlough, how to claim furlough, and all the financial impacts that occurred around that. As rising costs has occurred, we've built a whole new section on the website and some new tools to help people in terms of with that challenge. Now, I don't need to tell you, for most people, the increases in fuel, whether it's petrol, whether it's diesel, their utilities, their gas cost, their electricity cost, their water cost, crucially their food bills, are all consistently going up at the moment. And we just don't see that changing as long as there's this huge uncertainty, particularly having a war on the other side of Europe with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We just do not see that changing in the near future. So what we've done is we've developed some new content and some new assets to help people with those pressures around the theme of Find Your Way Forward. And why have we picked that theme? Why do we call it Find Your Way Forward? Well, one of the things that we know at the Money and Pension Service, and I know from my career, is that when people face tough times, when people face financial challenges or financial difficulty or financial stress, and their financial well-being goes down, a lot of people, and we're not talking 100,000 or 200,000, we're talking millions of people, put their head in the sand. They try and pretend that the situation isn't there. So their debts build up, their arrears build up, and they don't take actions. They don't take proactive decisions. We know it's tough times. We're not pretending to anybody it's not. I'm a civil servant. In the last 2 years, I've had a 1% pay rise a year. So, inflation at the moment is 10%. It's nowhere near what inflation is currently doing. Lots and lots of people, whether they're in employment, whether they're on a fixed income, whether they're unemployed, whether they're pensioners, are finding times really tough at the moment. So one of the things that we've deliberately done is we've built a new tool about help for people struggling with bills and payments, and also the order in which we pay those. So Lee, can we just jump on one more, please? And I'll just take people through that tool. So this is our new tool, which is called a bill prioritizer. And if you were to use this live, it takes about 10 to 12 minutes. I didn't want to do it live because it just takes up too much time of today's session. There's so much to cover. But if you look at that page, what you'll see is that when you click onto that particular tool on our website on MoneyHelper, it covers all the potential costs that you might have. So it'll cover things like energy bills, credit cards, whether you have a rent payment, whether you have a mortgage payment, your council tax bill, any overdrafts you have, car finance, gas, electricity, the whole remit. I've put as many as I can on there. Actually, when you go on the page live, there's a couple more columns below that. So it will cover every opportunity in terms of bills and payments that people need to make each month. And what the tool asks you to do is it asks you to click on all the items that you actually pay, that you and your family or you and your household pay in the current climate. And then it will build the order that it suggests that you should pay them, and also the opportunities in terms of things like rebates and repayments. So I'll explain that in a little bit more detail now. One of the reasons it builds that order is because from experience, we know that when people struggle, they don't necessarily pay the most important bills first. They'll often pay the bills of the organisations that chase them the most and what we call shout loudest. So very often people will end up paying their Disney bill, their mobile phone bill, their unsecured credit card bill before they'll pay their rent or their mortgage or their council tax. And what that tool will do is it will build the order that we suggest people pay their payments in. It's very important that you do that, because what happens in these times of crisis is it's really key that people manage to keep a roof over their heads and pay the key bills that allow them to live their lives. So that will be things like your rent, your mortgage, your council tax, your gas, your electricity, your water, things of that nature. And then the lesser bills, it will look at as being of lower priority. The other thing that the tool does is, going back to what I said right at the start, we like to be proactive in terms of what we say to people and suggestions that we make. So, for example, if you click on once it's built the tool, if you put in council tax there, and you then click on the council tax section, it will explain to you all the rules about council tax rebates. So, for example, currently there's a rebate between bands A and D. That should be provided automatically to you by your council, but it's very common for councils to have lost track of people during COVID, or for people to have moved house or to have moved where they rent. I did that myself during COVID. My council lost track of me, so I had to ring up my council and say, wait a minute, you've forgotten to pay me my rebate. Here's where I live now. Can we make sure that you get that back? So they could join up the dots. It will also make suggestions on things like gas and electricity. So, for example, all the providers are obliged to try and help people if they get into arrears and start struggling difficulty. So it will provide information about how to contact those kind of teams and the kind of conversations to have with them. Again, going back to what I said right at the start, we're not naive about this. We're not innocent about this. We understand that people are having to make some really tough choices. A couple of weeks ago, as I was saying to Lee, I was with all the housing associations in the northwest of England, met and spoke with them in Warrington, and they support hundreds of thousands of people, including many people on lower incomes, lower paid people, or people on fixed incomes who are perhaps retired. And one of the chief executives stood up there and said, people are going to have to make some really, really tough choices. And the important point is they want to get that information in front of them and help them make those choices. We can't change what the bills are. We can't change as MaPS what gas costs. We can't change what fuel costs. We can't change what food costs. But what we can help people do is make really informed choices. And if they're starting to struggle, perhaps come and speak to us or some of the partners that we work with. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that in a moment. Lee, can we move on one more, please? So, one of the things that we help people do is we provide money guidance when people are finding times are really tough, when they're finding they've got a lot of difficulty, when they're finding they've got what we call financial stress. So I said to you earlier on, you can talk to us live for money guidance using the telephone. You can see there's no 800 number there. We also have, because we cover England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, we have a legal obligation to provide colleagues who can speak Welsh. So anybody who lives across the border or speaks Welsh and wants to speak to us, we have colleagues who can do that. All the calls are free. We're open every working day of the year from 8 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. Going back to what I said earlier on about WhatsApp and speaking to us digitally, if you want to talk to us on WhatsApp, that's very popular, particularly with younger people. There's a number that people can contact us through there. And there's also an ability to talk to us live for money guidance using our web chat, which I mentioned earlier on. Really popular. You can see all those services. Money guidance bit for web chat is also available on a Saturday. You might sometimes have to wait a little bit. Sometimes, as I said earlier on, if we feel that your query will be best supported by a charity, perhaps like Step Change Debt Charity or people like Citizens Advice, then we'll pass you on to those organisations. But we take lots of inquiries, and we're not just what I would call one and done. If you need to speak to us several times over a couple of months, we're very happy for you to do that and for you to engage with us. So can I just move on one more, Lee, please? So just to expand on debt advice a little bit more, In terms of debt advice, we help, as I said to you earlier on, we have really good relationships with those organisations. We also help provide funding to some of those key bigger national organisations. So we provide a lot of funding to Citizens Advice, and we provide a lot of funding to organisations like Step Charity. Now, if you're speaking to debt advisor, those people are trained. They have a slightly different, background to the colleagues that we hire. We tend to hire people very empathetic with a wide range of skills. But debt advice organisations tend to hire people of a very specific kind of debt background. They're really good. I've worked with Step Change Debt Charity for nearly 20 years. They're really good organisations. I've worked with Citizen Advice for nearly as long. They're really good organisations to engage with. They're very helpful. They tend to be very practical. One of the good things about Citizen Advice is sometimes people like to engage face to face. And now we've come out of COVID restrictions. Citizens Advice are able to do that again. Step Change Debt Charity, by and large, are a telephone or digital-based organisation, just because that's how they've really been set up over the last 10 or 12 years. But if you need that extra help, you need that extra support, they're really worth dealing with and engaging with those people. And what I would say about debt and queries for debt is, if people are starting to suffer, if people on the call are starting to suffer, if people in their families are starting to get struggle or get anxious, if it's keeping people awake at night, it's best to engage earlier and have that conversation sooner rather than later, because the longer you leave it, the more debts tend to build up. And the sooner you tackle that problem, the better it is in terms of the engagement, in terms of making decisions, in terms of being able to budget, in terms of being able to make a plan, in terms of being able to speak to the creditors and decide who's going to get paid what. The other bit that we do is, if you click on our website, you'll see we have sections on particular issues that people might have. So you can see, for example, there's a section there about problems with paying your mortgage. You know, millions and millions and millions of people in this country have mortgages. It's usually one of the biggest payments they make every month. So we have some sections there that really break down practical information for key topics. We can't do that for every possible debt that you might have, but for the really big debts, things like mortgages, perhaps credit cards and things of that nature, then we tend to have key sections that give you extra information and we help you decide what you're going to do next. Lee, can I move on one more, please? So on that basis, I said earlier on that I mentioned when we also have tools that help people in specific circumstances. And one of the tools that we have for debt is called the Money Navigator tool. Now, this is a different tool to what we were talking about in terms of the budget planner. What this tool is looking for is what we call signs of financial difficulty, signs of financial stress, signs that people are starting to have a tough time, that they're struggling, that their outgoings are more than their incoming. So this particular tool, if you use it on our website, we actually set this up right at the start of COVID because we noticed pretty soon into COVID that people's financial stress was increasing very rapidly. And this has been one of our most popular tools really over the last 2.5 years. What this tool will do is, first of all, it'll ask where you live in the UK. It does that because the rules are slightly different in England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. We're not being nosy, we just want to make sure we're giving you the right information. And then the tool will basically ask for what your incomings are and the key outgoings, and it will look for that differential. It's not as detailed as the budget planner, but it's looking for that differential where you might be getting into problems. If it sees that, what the Money Navigator will do is a couple of things. It will suggest the issues that you might need to tackle first, similar to building on what we had to do with the Bill Prioritiser. It will also then make suggestions about who you might want to go and speak to. So the first thing it will look for is, have you claimed all the benefits that you're entitled to? Literally billions of pounds every year go unclaimed in the UK because people don't claim all the benefits they're entitled to. We can't claim those for you. You would still need to speak to DWP, but it will make the suggestion and the recommendation. And then the other thing it will do is it will look and see if you need that practical extra help from one of those big charities, someone like Step Change, someone like Citizens Advice, speaking to our contact centre, and it will also make recommendations about possibly speaking to your lender. So one of the things that many consumers in the UK aren't aware of is every lender, whether it's a bank, whether it's a building society, whether it's a credit card company, are legally obliged to have an assistance team that helps people when they struggle and get into difficulty. Now, before I worked for the Money and Pension Service, I worked for that team at Lloyds Banking Group. So all their brands, Halifax, Birmingham Midshires, Scottish Widows, whoever it was, they all have teams that do that. At Lloyds, we had about 2,000 people, and they still have about 2,000 people who do that every day, every week, every month, every season. That's their job. It's not something new. That's what they always do. And they will look at what kind of opportunities there is to help people if they're starting to struggle. So it might be that they can find a way of perhaps giving people a reduced interest rate on their credit card. It might be that they can find a payment holiday for their mortgage whilst people get their finances a bit more into order. They'll look at the whole range of opportunities that's there. That is not a choice. Every lender has to do that. Many people aren't aware that that service is there and that opportunity is there. So again, that tool will look at that and perhaps make some suggestions of what you can speak to your lender about if there are specific queries or specific problems with a particular debt. Money Navigator tool tends to take about 15-16 minutes to use in terms of the information you need to put into. Again, along with the budget planner, is one of the most popular tools that we have at the moment, just simply because it fits with the current challenge around cost of living. Lee, can we move on one more, please? And I know earlier on someone asked about pension-wise and pensions. I did say to Lee today that I'll give a focus really on the kind of debt side, the money side, the guidance side, and the kind of tools and support that we provide around cost of living and inflation. But I don't want to ignore pensions and pensions guidance. So we hire specifically people who've either worked for pension companies, people like Aviva or Scottish Widows or Royal, or perhaps they've worked for the pension regulator or they've worked for us for a long time. We still get a lot of pensions queries. Pensions are really complicated. And what you tend to find is that beyond people buying a house, it's usually the biggest investment financial people make in their lives. They're saving into a pension, or they're being part of a company pension scheme or part of an employer's pension scheme. One of the key decisions that people need to make about their pensions is when they choose to retire. And that goes back to the query about, are we linked with PensionWise? So yes, the PensionWise colleagues are ours. They work for us. The reason we have that particular separate team of PensionWise colleagues is our PensionWise colleagues focus on helping people who are aged 50 or over, who are either about to retire or thinking about retirement or considering their options. One of the big things that's changed in pensions in my working life is that once upon a time, I look at both my parents are retired now. They work for one pension. They both work in the public sector all their lives and retired, and they just have one pension each. Very straightforward. For most people, that's just not how it is anymore. People tend to accumulate pensions or pension pots as they move around in their careers. So I'll give you myself as an example. I've got 3 pensions. I used to work for one of the big building societies, Skipton Building Society, and then went to work for Lloyds Halifax. So I've got a pension with Skipton. I've also got a pension from all the years I worked for Lloyds Halifax. And I now have my civil service pension, which is building up as I work at Money Pension Service. So when I choose to retire, I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to use those 3 pension pots, what I'm going to do with them, what the return will be, how they will provide income to me in my retirement. That's a very, very common situation. And particularly when I work with lots of employers, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with Jaguar Land Rover. When I work with their colleagues, it's not unusual for people to have 5 or 6 pension pots. So our PensionWise colleagues are there to provide lots of support around that. We can handle lots of general pension queries. One of the most common pension queries is how to track down pension pots people have lost. And we have lots of information and advice that help people do that. But those PensionWise colleagues can provide an independent assessment of people's circumstances and advice as to the next steps that what people might want to take. They won't tell you what to do. They won't say you must retire at this stage or retire in this particular year, but they're really good at looking at that overall position. The one thing I would say about the PensionWise service is very popular. So if you want that session to book in one of those sessions, you usually need to book in like kind of week to 10 days in advance. It's not months away, but if you ask for the very next day, usually they've taken all the slots, they've provided all that information. You can do it face to face. That can sometimes just take a little bit more. We have PensionWise colleagues who actually are based in a lot of citizen advice offices around the UK, so they can often do that. And the only other bit I always get asked is, I'm 49, can I have a PensionWise appointment? And I'm really sorry, we had to draw the line somewhere, and we draw the line at 50 because for most pension schemes, 50 is the very earliest you could access it. So we tend to go from 50 on because it's just such a popular service. So you're 49, you just have to wait until you click into be 50. But it is a very, very popular service, and the guys and the men and women who work for that are great. I've worked with them for a long time, and they're really, really helpful. Lee, can we just move on to the last few slides? So I just always provide a bit of a summary. I promised Lee I'd talk to about a quarter of the hour, and it's about 2:45 now. So I always just provide a bit of a summary at the end, just about who we are, just really get across the totally free, totally impartial money guidance. There's lots of diagnostic tools and calculators. I've shown you a couple today. There are other tools and calculators on the website, lots of different circumstances. Support's available over the phone and online. we're very happy to speak to you. We're very happy to have a digital conversation with you. But we also know lots of people nowadays in today's world, two of the most popular times for our website, for all those views that we get on our website, are Friday night after people have finished the end of the week, and Sunday night before people start the new week. And that's fine. Our website is built to take absolutely huge amounts of traffic. You can see, we're having tens and tens and tens of millions worth of views every year. We're built to take that. During COVID at times, sometimes our website traffic was going up 300, 400% in a day if something particular happened. We can take that kind of traffic. That's what we're designed to do. The click through to the key part of the website for MoneyHelper is there. The WhatsApp, if people want to speak to us digitally, is there. And I said I've mentioned the free phone telephone number. And Lee, that gives me about 12 or 13 minutes to answer any questions.
It does indeed, yes. Does anybody have any questions? Let me just check the chat. We've got a question from Martine, and she said, do you think the mortgage interest rates will increase in line with inflation?
That's a really tough one. One of the things I'm not allowed to do as a government person is give you specific financial advice. My personal feeling, when I worked at Lloyd's, my speciality was helping people who were struggling with their mortgages. My personal opinion is it will continue to rise because the Bank of England and the central banks around the Western world tend to see that as a way to kind of push back on inflation. So I think it probably will continue to rise. How high it rises is very, very difficult to say. I think the central bank and the Bank of England is very concerned about having circumstances, perhaps as we had in the early 1990s, where the levels of mortgage rates was incredibly high. But it's a big challenge, and it's one of the ways that they try and reduce inflation in the current climate. And most people on the call will be aware the housing market has just absolutely boomed during COVID. So I think there is some concern from the Bank of England on that side.
Well, thank you. We've got another one here from Alison, who said, are the AI systems or are they real people at the end of the chats?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, we don't do the here's a bot. We're big on people having an engagement or a conversation with us. So we've put that digital system in just simply because we've just had more and more demand, particularly younger people, people in their teens or their 20s or their 30s. There's a section of society that wants to talk to us that way. Even if you ask them to ring us, they prefer to do it digitally, and that's fine. But no, we're not. You're not being sent off to a chat box on the other side of the world with people who know nothing about UK finance. We're very, very big on hiring people. We don't do that with any of our queries. Everybody who works for us is based somewhere within the UK, whether that's England, whether it's Scotland, whether it's Wales, whether it's Northern Ireland, and that includes the query feedback to you guys.
Well, thank you. We also have another one from Julie, who said, do you have service leaflets available to share with cancer patients? If yes, where did they request them from?
Yeah, one of the challenges we've had, thanks for that question, that's a really good question, during COVID is prior to COVID, if you wind the clock back kind of 4 or 5 years, we used to provide a lot of leaflets and mail those out via our distribution team that we had based down in London. We've reduced that for 2 reasons. First of all, environmentally, every time that leaflet goes out of date, we have to pulp it. We can't send it out if it's out of date. And we were literally pulping tens of thousands of leaflets every year. And during COVID and the current climate that we have of inflation and these rising costs, things are changing so rapidly. They're changing every few months. Once upon a time, things would change perhaps every 6 months or every 12 months, that we were just pulping loads and loads of leaflets. So what we do now is if you go on our website, any leaflets that we have, you can download as a PDF and you can print them yourselves. You can ask for a small run of the leaflets, of certain leaflets, but we don't. When I first worked with the Money and Pension Service, I'm not exaggerating, we had about 60 different leaflet types. And Lee, we've deliberately reduced that down because it just was costing a fortune and wasn't being very effective, to be honest with you. Obviously, when the leaflets are done digitally, we have what we call Pulsing and Insights, and a team who work in London. So we have about 50 odd colleagues who just work on the website every day, and they work on things like the leaflets, updating them as fast as they can. So if there's a change, the Chancellor changes a benefit level or regulation, we'll work to change that as fast as we can. I'm not saying if they announce something in the House of Commons that by 3:10 we will have done it, but usually within a couple of days we'll have updated. So the best way is jump on our website, and if you go into the section that says leaflets, it'll show you what's available at the current time.
I'll also find this and send it out to you guys afterwards as well.
Yeah.
I've got another question from Stephen, who said, "Where can under 50s access pension advice? I accept the 50+ criteria, but by that point, many have contributed over 50% of their pension pots, and people like to plan ahead."
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a pension calculator. So I'll probably not be clear enough there, Stephen. That particular service, I've just responded to the person asked about pension wise, is just for the age 50 or over. We have lots of other pension colleagues who've worked for us for many, many years, know loads about pensions, and you can speak to them. So it's just that particular one part of the service. So the rest of our pension service provision is open to all ages. So to be clear, whether you're somebody who's come straight out of school and asking in their teens or their 20s or their 30s or their 40s, then we're very, very happy to take those queries. And again, the people that we have all have a very strong pension background. There's also, just to go back, if you want to do things digitally, there is some pensions calculators on the website. Sometimes people say to me, "Why do you have a pensions calculator?" My pensions company does that as well. But we find that a lot of people just like to run it by us as well, to have a kind of second opinion or an independent opinion. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I've got one. In terms of, like, say, scams, for example, there's a lot of financial scams going around guaranteeing like high rates of return. What advice would you from MaPS give to prevent like being scammed?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really common question, and during COVID has become much more prevalent. So one of the things that we do is, like I said to you earlier on, we try and push back on what we see as illegal money lending or scam lending or fraudulent lending to people, or opportunities to access their finances or access their pension. The first thing I always say to people is, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. 99 times out of 100, if somebody makes you an offer and it just sounds too good to be true, it is. These fraudulent attempts to access either your cash or your pension or your credit card or your bank account, they're really, really smart. So we use a phrase the government uses, which is just stop and take five. Just take 5 minutes, think about it. If somebody's pressurizing you to make a decision or to do something, that's not right. That's a red flag instantly. I worked for Lloyds before I joined MaPS. Lloyds are the biggest bank in the country. One of the things we taught all the staff that work for Lloyds, 75,000 staff, never pressurize somebody. Never, ever. And I used to work for, as I say, one of the other big building sites before that. We would never pressurize somebody. So if somebody's doing that, that needs to ring some alarm bells in your head. The other thing is, if it just feels too good to be true, again, walk away, think about it, because the reality is it probably is too good to be true, and it's probably fraudulent. So I'll give you an example. One of the big car companies that I'm working with at the moment, they have moved, pension provider. They've moved from AXA to Scottish Widows. They've done that very professionally. All the staff have been, tens of thousands of staff have been told. But these fraudulent criminals are so clever that they get to hear of that, and we don't know how. But they've been targeting some of the individuals who work for that particular car manufacturer, writing to them and sending them texts, sending them emails, saying, "Oh, we know you're moving to Scottish Widows, but we can give you a return that's 2% better than Scottish Widows every year. We can guarantee that." The word guarantee always is a bit of a warning sign as well. What you need to think to yourself is, how can they do that? It's not realistic. Scottish Widows are one of the biggest pension providers in the United Kingdom. How can somebody you've never heard of guarantee a return that's bigger than one of the biggest financial institutions in the country? It just doesn't add up. Now, to give the car company their due, they heard of that, their staff heard of that. We've worked with the car company, we've also worked with the union that supports their members, and we've pushed back on that, and nobody's been scammed. But the bit I would say, really, Lee, is if it just feels too good to be true, or there's a red flag, or there's any sort of pressure being put on you, walk away. Put the phone call down, stop the email, have a think, come and talk to us, go and talk to one of your colleagues, ring your bank directly, but just don't feel pressured into making a decision.
No, I ask because there's always a lot of NHS targeted staff campaigns, and more or less they turn out to be scams. So it's kind of just looking into that. I'm going to open it to the floor. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? If
Yes,
so,
please.
Judith, over to you.
Hi there, Lee. I'm James. Just a
Hello.
question. Hi there. Thank you very much for a really, really clear presentation. We have actually referred a lot of our NHS staff members to the Money and Pension Service. One thing that comes to mind always when you mention that a lot of it is digital. Is there any opportunity for maybe staff members to speak to somebody face to face, but not because not a lot of our staff, they really don't like, using IT and stuff like that. They just need that one-to-one
Yeah,
contact.
and that's why, to go back to, you might remember I said a bit about funding. The reality for us is we've got 400 colleagues and we just couldn't do that. If we did face to face all the time, it would just be impossible. We'd be absolutely swamped, and particularly in the climate that we are at the moment. But if people do want to have face to face, one of the things that we do is we provide a lot, and I mean millions and millions and millions of pounds of funding to Citizens Advice, who are in
Okay.
practically every town, every high street in the country. Now, the people in Citizens Advice are well trained. They're really good people. I've worked with them for a very long time. And unlike us, or say Step Change Debt Charity, they do see people face to face. So
Right.
that's one of the ways that we do that. But it's not one of the things, I have to be honest with you, that's not how the government has set us up. And if it wanted us to do that, it'd probably need to make us about 5 times bigger, to be honest.
Okay, that's fine because we use Citizens Advice as well. So thanks for that
Yeah, just
clarification.
the best thing to do is ring the local Citizens Advice office. Bit like us, this current climate, they're often busy. We're not pretending that any of us are not busy at the moment. We're really busy, but ring them, try and book in an appointment at a time that's convenient, and that's the best way to do it. And as I say, I've worked with those kind of, with CA for a very long time, and they're really great people.
Okay, thank you again.
Real, thank you. James, we've just got 2 minutes left and we've had one final question come in, and it's from Joy, who's just said, are you able to give advice on equity release?
The one bit I'll say a few points here because I have a very strong mortgage background, so I'm familiar with equity release. I can't tell you, Joy, what to do on equity release. That's a decision for you personally. But the one thing I would definitely say is if you're considering equity release, you can find that the offer from whichever provider is supplying it can vary dramatically in terms of how good, average, or poor it is from provider to provider. So if you do consider equity release, I would strongly suggest you get several quotes. Don't just go with one organisation. You can be very surprised at the difference between organisations in terms of what their offer is to you as an individual. So it's a complex product in terms of equity release. It's quite a common product, but it's quite an involved product. So it's worth just taking that time. Don't just speak to one provider. Perhaps go on the internet. I think we do have a section on equity release within the website. So perhaps read our information first of all, and then if you do that, do just kind of make sure you don't just go to one or two providers. I'd certainly go to at least 3.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And bang on time. We've got 1 minute to spare. Just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time out to join us today. And also thank you to you, James, for the concise presentation. Like I said, this session has been recorded. So what we'll be doing is uploading it to our YouTube and putting it in our newsletter. You can share this amongst people. I'll also be in contact with you after. I'll send you all an email as well with all the links and presentation in as well.
Resilience is strength. Let us help you find yours.